Welcome back to another episode of Coming Out. Today we have Justin Mendoza-Routt, who's a candidate for the Democratic nomination for District 113 of the Florida State House. Joey, welcome to the show. My hat goes to all of you who have the courage to jump in the race and want to make a difference. What makes you the right candidate, or tell us, why you're running?
Yeah. So, well, first, thank you for having me. Obviously, it's great to be here in the studio with you and to have this conversation. I guess, really where I'd like to start is just talking a little bit about my background. So I was born and raised here in Miami, and I think, I had a similar story to a lot of people that have grown up here. My family is, I come from a family of immigrants. My mom was born in Barranquilla, and she had me very young. So we had a very working class, upbringing here. Like many working class families in Miami, it was, can be very tough here. But we were able to, scratch together and make it work. And even though we struggled with a lot of different, issues, financial instability, housing, all of that, I was able to get a great education. I got to go to the University of Pennsylvania and build a successful career and working in finance. And so ultimately, really what's driving me here today is now seeing, today with the economy and what with the cost of living crisis, housing, the corruption, in Tallahassee, that it's really hammering working class families. And, the life that I and my family was able to build here, only 20 years ago is really slipping away. And as those economic opportunities are getting, fewer and further between, I'm running to fight to really bring that economic opportunity back to working families here in Miami. And I think as, a candidate who has been on both sides of the financial spectrum, knowing what it's like to struggle when you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, all of that, and also seeing success on the other side, I know what it's like to have to, scratch together and pull resources to build yourself a better life. And I know what it takes to get there. And I think I'm the only candidate in this race who really has that experience on both sides. But ultimately, I'm running to bring, real solutions that are going to work for the people of Miami that make this city great.
District 113 is a beautiful district.
It is.
Key Biscayne has a lot of issues. Not Key Biscayne having issues, but the district has a lot of resiliency issues.
Yep, absolutely.
What do you see the top issues that you're facing in your district?
Yeah, so a few things. Obviously, again, cost of living. I think, across the country right now, what we've seen under, especially accelerating over the last year and a half into the Trump administration, costs are just getting out of control. Whether we're talking about, just filling up your tank at the pump or trying to scratch together the money to afford your rent or property insurance. Voters really across the income spectrum, I'm hearing when I'm knocking the doors every day, that's top of mind for them. But as you alluded to, the other things that we're seeing too, especially within my district, are those resiliency issues. I don't think, I have to, prove it to anybody. If we just go out, look out at the bay here, we see every day that, the tides are getting higher and higher. If you talk to any of the people who live in Edgewater, just when we have king tides, water is flooding in there and people's cars are getting damaged. And so there are real resilience and infrastructure needs. We also see, like you mentioned, in Key Biscayne, they have the big infrastructure project, the Big Dig, I think they're calling it, that people are talking about. But there's a lot of issues there where if we want to have, honestly, a city that's going to survive what will be the inevitable, storms that we get hit by, we've been lucky the last few years, but eventually a hurricane is going to come. We got to make those investments in resilience and infrastructure. And then beyond that too, just like protecting the environment itself. There's a lot of nature-based solutions that I think people, across the political spectrum are in support of. Things like, natural barriers, protecting our coral reefs, all of that. And then the third thing I'm hearing a lot from people at the doors, especially young families, is public education. I think, as we know, DeSantis has really led the assault on the public school system here. And that's, really a long-term consequence that we're going to have to deal with if we want to have, good jobs, a good economy, like businesses that decide to, take root here. We need to have, people who are well-educated. And from my perspective and what I'm hearing at the doors from families every day is they're concerned that our public school system isn't getting the funding it needs, that our teachers aren't getting paid what they need. And they're worried about, if they're going to be able to send their kids to a good school.
Well, public salaries are the lowest, one of the lowest in Florida.
Exactly.
Teacher salaries.
Yeah.
Now with these 3 tiers of schools that we're having, school systems, the charter and then the voucher ones now, it's a real storm there that's brewing.
Yeah.
That really we have to come to a solution and stop thinking that what we've been doing for the past 30 years is,
I mean, it's clearly not working. We're at the bottom of the rankings in almost every category,
But they continue to push it and get through things, and now they're banning books. And,
exactly.
It's like, what's next?
Right. Yeah. Well, and the sad thing about it is, I think, I might be cynical here, but I don't think I'm wrong. But Ron DeSantis has really, weaponized, in particular, our public school system, with a lot of these culture war issues that, frankly, most families don't care about. You got the MAGA extremists who are, hammering the anti-DEI, anti-woke agenda, and Ron DeSantis is cynically latched onto that because I think for whatever reason he believes that there's a chance for him to be president one day. I don't think that'll ever be the case, and I hope that stays that way.
Amen to that.
Exactly. But the consequence of that is that we're attacking, LGBTQ, students in schools that don't feel safe. We're attacking, we're literally removing our history, our American history, out of school books. And so, we're just seeing this assault from multiple angles of, really preventing students from going to school, feeling safe, being able to be themselves and getting a good quality education. And on the flip side, what are we seeing with that? I do think, families should be able to have a choice about where they send their kids to school, but that shouldn't come at the cost of, teachers getting a good, salary, of, students who are in public schools being able to get the resources they need. And like you said, the results speak for themselves. We're at the bottom of the rankings for reading, for math, for graduation rates. And what we're doing right now clearly is not working, other than driving a lot of hatred and bigotry, and removing a lot of our history for,
I definitely want to come back to DEI because we're, at my day job, I'm being impacted. So definitely we'll come back and we'll talk about that. But what else are you hearing as you're knocking on doors? Because you have to be hearing, food insecurities as well. You have to be hearing about, what is it? Your district is very, you live in the district. Yeah. So what do you hear?
Yeah. So, 113 is a very unique district. It's very diverse in a lot of ways, both ethnically, economically, et cetera. So, like you said, a big thing that we're hearing from people is just that general, anxiety about, making ends meet. You talk to, some of my constituents who are in, the West Grove, where they're getting threatened by overdevelopment, their neighborhood's getting pushed out. We're seeing people who are, worrying about my property insurance. Our market right now has just made it, very difficult for families, even families who are doing very well, to make the decision to say, hey, I'm going to, even pay the money to get insurance on my home because, all right, I don't even know how well they're going to cover any damage if I do need to make a claim. Like you said, food insecurity, especially right now with grocery prices through the roof, which I think is very much as a consequence of a lot of the just crazy policies that we're seeing from the Trump administration. And really at the end of the day, it's people being worried about, their future. I think here in America, but in particular in Miami, most people just want to be able to raise their family, pay their bills, give themselves the lives that they're proud of, that they feel secure in. And frankly, we're failing at all levels of government right now to provide that for them. And that's kind of the consistent theme I'm hearing from people, that anxiety about that.
What was the key issue that made you jump in?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, myself,
personally, yes.
Yeah. So to kind of go a little bit into my personal story, in more detail. So growing up as a kid, we were homeless for a little bit. My father was incarcerated and, he's, got out and he's fully reformed, and I'm super proud of, his trajectory in life today. But, when I was a little kid, that was tough. And so, we didn't have a stable roof over our head for a little bit. And so for me, housing has always just been really important for me. And right now, I think, talk to literally anybody, and we are all saying, whether you're a homeowner or a renter, that housing is just getting out of control. And so, in particular for me, what kind of drew me to get involved in this race here is I personally just, in my personal time, spent a lot of time helping different families that are struggling with housing stability. And a lot of the families I've helped, I've tried to use some of my political connections, and I've gotten a lot of help from some great elected officials, people like now Mayor Higgins, Senator Chev Jones. A lot of them have given help in connecting some of these families that I've met and supported with a lot of resources. But
By knocking on doors?
uh, sorry.
Have you met them by knocking on doors?
This is before I was a candidate. Yeah.
Okay.
Just over the last, really since the pandemic, when
Yes.
housing really got out of control, kind of would see just this, really boom in families on the streets, and even the ones that don't necessarily show up in counts. There's a lot of these motels you'll see on like Biscayne Boulevard and kind of that Mimo area that effectively function as unofficial housing, homeless shelters. And so anyway, all that to say, that's an issue that's near and dear to me. And even in trying to help a variety of different families, just again, outside of politics, but, through the political connections I've made, having been president of the Miami-Dade Young Dems and other stuff within the party that I've held, it is a very difficult system to navigate if you're somebody who is facing trouble, trying to get support, from the government. And so, we've seen that problem accelerate as housing has gotten out of control. And so, as somebody who's dealt with it myself, who's had to go through the system when I was a kid, to see that's even worse and more difficult to navigate now, as housing gets even more and more expensive, to me, I'm seeing a crisis that's making it, almost impossible for people to live here and to really make the decision to start a family here. And so that's really what motivated me to jump here in the first place. In addition to that, just, I'm 37 years old. A lot of my peers, and friends of mine who have recently started families are talking about moving away. I myself right now don't have kids, but I plan to. But, even though I'm doing well for myself personally, the decision to, have kids and raise them here in Miami is getting harder and harder when you're talking about, the cost of having just a 3-bedroom house to put your kids in their own rooms, to pay for them to go to school and then college and then groceries. And I'm seeing more and more people, that are my age who are saying, what, like, it doesn't really make sense to stay here in Miami, even though I was born and raised here and my family is here, because it's just not affordable anymore. And that's sad for me to see. I love this city. This is my home. It's always been my home, and it'll always be my home. And if we don't tackle these challenges, we're going to lose a lot of really great people, and really what makes Miami what it is.
So do you think the workforce housing is working? The ones that we're doing, talk to us about Live Local,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that the overdevelopment here in Miami has obviously not led to lower costs of living and housing
Right.
costs for people here, and of course, Live Local is a big part of that. In addition, I don't think it ever really makes sense to say, hey, we're gonna take the decision making power of the communities that are most affected by development away from them and put it in, the hands of people who don't even live anywhere near Miami, much less are affected by it. A 10-hour drive away up in Tallahassee.
Amen to that one.
Exactly.
Preempting is horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when Miami-Dade has its own home rule charter.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
exactly.
We've just like forgotten everything else. It's just what we want and that's it.
Right. Exactly. And again, it's like similar with public education. I wouldn't support it either way, but if we saw some sort of positive results that were working for people, maybe you could make an argument that would make sense. But the reality is that the results speak for themselves. Like, just I drove by. So my apartment, that I lived in an apartment off of Biscayne and Second Avenue, just outside of the district, back in like 2020, 2021. And at the time, I was paying $1,800 a month in rent there. I just drove by 2 or 3 weeks ago. Same exact apartment, same amenities, nothing different about it. And there's a sign out there, rents starting at $3,800 a month.
Wow.
And that's 5-6 years, that's just crazy.
Astronomically.
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing that across the board. You talk to somebody who's trying to buy their first home, and places that where you could have gotten an affordable house for a couple $100,000, three, maybe 400,000 just 5 years ago. We're now talking 7, 8, 900, $1 million just to buy really a starter family home. And that's just frankly not working for the vast majority of the people that live here in Miami.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree with you on that one. So what role should the state play in this mess that we're in?
Yeah. You mean specific to housing?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a bunch of things that we can do. First, we need to leverage the things that are there already. So we have the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust. That's a state trust that is, in theory, supposed to be used to support affordable housing. That is very commonly rated by legislators in Tallahassee every year to spend on budget priorities other than affordable housing. So first and foremost, the money that we're already allocating towards that needs to actually go to that. Second, there's a lot of things that we can do. Obviously, as we talked about before, we need to put the decision-making power back into local communities. At the end of the day, the people that live here know what they need better than the people up in Tallahassee. But there are other.
But where do you think that comes from? Wanting them to have the power to implement what they want and supersede everything that a local would want.
Yeah, well, so I think few things. First, as pretty much anybody who pays attention to the news, recognizes, there's unfortunately a lot of corruption in the state. We've seen the Republicans really weaponize that and unfortunately take advantage of that for their own personal interests to.
But they've been in charge for the last 30 years.
Exactly.
So if we're in this mess now, I mean, we got to call a spade a spade.
Exactly.
And in this case, it really falls on them.
Yep, but I couldn't agree more.
But they're using it as a weapon against their own mess. They're using it against others. I just don't understand that. It's mind blowing.
Well, I mean, to your point though, they've been in charge for the last 30 years, and unfortunately, the message that they've gotten from this is that why change it? It's working for them,
Yeah, but if you want to change it, then you're considered a communist or socialist.
Exactly.
And it's like, come on, really?
Right.
Is that the only defense you have? Because I'm not in support of your housing.
And it speaks to the weakness of their argument. I mean, it's the same song they've been singing for years. If you want to help working families, you're a socialist, comunista. It's the same song they sing because they don't have a real answer to that. Because the reality is, it is just corruption from the Republicans for their benefit and for the benefit of their corporate donors and the billionaire backers that are supporting them. And it's sad to see, unfortunately. But to your point, the best way that we can fight back from that is to elect Democrats that are going to fight for working people, that are going to actually fight for affordable housing solutions, and not just more giveaways to developer donors who are just lining their pockets.
I hope when you can cross party lines and be able to be more centrist and bring those on the left more to the center and vice versa, those on the right back to because that's how it was before. I remember a time when I was going to Columbus and I was doing Florida history. We were studying and it was bipartisanship,
right?
And it seems like nowadays it's like, if you don't agree with your philosophy, then you're going to attack me, you're going to criticize me, and then you're going to threaten me, and
exactly.
Come on.
Well, and I think that's what we've seen. It starts. I mean, not starts, but Trump has really just taken that to a whole new level, and Ron DeSantis, who's trying to be a Trump mini me, has replicated that model. And to your point, I don't get into a habit of praising Republicans, so I won't go into specific names, but I've even heard from Republican electeds that are the same story, which is that if you don't fall in line behind DeSantis, you are threatened. He will weaponize things against you. You know, your budget priorities will get sidelined. And it's kind of the same approach that we've seen Trump take within the Republican Party himself. But to your point, as you know, I am running as a Democrat, but at the end of the day, I'm running to serve my constituents. I don't care if you're red, blue, purple, green party, whatever it is. If you're working to help the people, I will work with you. And in the same way, if you're working against people, whether you're a Democrat or not, I'll work against you. But I'm looking for real solutions.
And I would call out a Democrat if they were corrupt just as fast as I would call a Republican. So it's not that I'm playing one side here. Yes, I'm a Democrat, but yeah, I'll call them out as well. So
that's, as you should.
You know, that's definitely not that's my position. But let's get into healthcare because there's so many issues that we want to get involved in.
There's a lot of messes that need to be cleaned up here.
Healthcare, you know, reproductive rights. How do you feel about reproductive rights?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most people here in the state, unfortunately, that, you know, with that our will being sidelined, I'm strongly in support of reproductive rights. At the end of the day, nobody can tell a woman what's best for her body besides her and her own doctor. So those decisions, like any other healthcare decision, should be made by the patient and nobody else, certainly not government. You know, it's really, you know, sad to see what's happened, you know, under DeSantis and with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. You know, won't go into specifics, but, you know, close family members of mine have faced consequences of that. And a lot of these stories are horrifying. You see, you know, women who are victims of SA and, you know, unfortunate situations who are unable to get, you know, the access to, you know, to care that they need in the face of that. Women who are facing miscarriages, things like that. You know, who have to worry about getting, you know, life-saving treatment because the doctors are concerned about, you know, government coming in and arresting them or doing something to retaliate against them. And it's really unfortunate. So
how do you feel about expanding Medicaid?
Fully in support of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a no-brainer. You know, it's not to get too deep in the weeds, but I think most people are aware that we pay taxes already for, you know, if you ever look at your income tax statement, you know, there's money that's set aside for, you know, for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The state of Florida, which goes back to, you know, the insanity of just reflexively challenging anything that Obama had put out and supported, when he expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, you know, it started with Rick Scott saying, you know, I'm going to fight back against Obamacare, so we're going to reject that. But right now, Floridians are paying taxes already for Medicaid dollars that we are choosing not to take from the federal government. So we're literally leaving money on the table, and that's money that could go towards supporting our hospitals, supporting patients. And the reality is when people don't have access to the healthcare that they need, whether it's preventative care, you know, insurance, things like that, the reality is they end up in the emergency room, and that makes healthcare more expensive for all of us, whether you're insured or not. So for me, Medicaid expansion is a no-brainer, and I'm fully in support of it. And I'm actually the only candidate in this race who's fully in support of it.
So we can make it even more affordable.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm hearing, and I'm listening to you, and I'm saying, okay, affordability would even come out of this.
Exactly.
So why not expand it even further? You know, but that's you know,
right. Yeah.
It's a sore subject that I have, and you know, I feel sometimes we need to discuss it, and you know, they kind of like to shun it, you know.
Right. But I think to your point, that's you know, something a lot of people don't realize. Even if you are not going to be a beneficiary of Medicaid expansion, that money that is spent on helping, you know, pay for preventative treatment, for healthcare for children, for, you know, a variety of things that, one, you know, make sure that people don't get sicker than they otherwise need to, because when they do, they end up having to go to emergency room, need surgeries, need more expensive forms of healthcare, which then means that when, you know, someone shows up in an emergency room, they don't have insurance, they don't pay their bills, that, you know, the hospital still has to cover their costs. We all end up bearing the burden of that, and our insurance costs end up going higher. So it's not just about benefiting the people who rightfully deserve that, but if we're already paying our taxes into that, we should get that money to pay for the people who need it, and that also will lower the cost for everybody else. So it's really an affordability issue that helps everyone.
And it's interesting how, I don't know where the district falls on this.
I actually have a map I could pull out and show you.
But with regards to participants in like ACA
Yeah.
and all that. I mean, Miami's one of the top users, and then the state of Florida doesn't want to expand. So it's like,
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. It's like double-edged sword, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like when it comes and bites us, it's going to be
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, it already is, you know, if you've had to go to the hospital recently, you know, I had an accident and ended up at Jackson, got great care from the doctors and nurses there. But, you know, fortunately, you know, I'm obviously all good now, but, you know, the bill I got afterwards, luckily insurance covered it. But, you know, for spending a day and a half in the hospital there, it was $18,000 just for having lied in the bed for, you know, a little bit there and some x-rays and everything, you know. So imagine somebody who needs surgery, you know, any other type of thing there. Like it's getting out of control right now. And
Totally,
just,
and we could sit here and discuss it, but
yeah,
let's continue on civil rights. Let's talk LGBTQ rights.
yeah,
at my day job, obviously, I am a champion for community advocacy and the rights of the LGBTQ community. Being a member of the community also puts me at really at a crossroad, because I can't understand how my own family at times
yep.
will reject us, you know, for
Mhm.
that. So talk to us about, you know, what's at the center of the debate of the LGBTQ. Talk to us about how you feel about that, and then we'll jump into DEI and SB 1134.
Yeah, sure. Just to put it very simply, regardless of who you are, how you identify, you know, who you love, you have the right to live the way that is most authentic to you without interference from the government, hatred, bigotry, harassment from people, and any sane government should fully defend and protect the rights of all of its citizens, again, regardless of who they love, how they identify, etc. We have seen that come under assault from DeSantis and the Republicans, both at the state level here and the federal level, you know, over the last 8 years, and the consequences speak for themselves. Whether you're talking about, you know, stuff like, you know, the Pulse shooting, you know, the general increase we've seen, you know, especially since Don't Say Gay was passed, of you know, rise in anti-LGBTQ violence. I think I saw a stat from GLAAD. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was 400% increase is what I saw in anti-LGBTQ violence since Don't Say Gay was passed. We're seeing kids who are afraid to you know, be themselves in schools. And
What is your message to those children?
yeah, I mean, my message to them is I'm here for you. I am going to be a leader in Tallahassee that is going to fight to protect you, to defend those rights, to make sure that you can live safely and authentically. I myself have several family members who are part of the LGBTQ community. You know, one of my cousins is trans. And you know, it's, you know, funny you mentioned that about family. You know, when my cousin, you know, came out to us and identified that way, it was unfortunate. He, you know, continued to be dead named, and some of my family members still continue to dead name him. You know, one of my siblings is gay, you know, gay woman, and you know, my nuclear family, we're all strongly supportive of her, but you know, some of our, you know, more distant family, not as accepting, and you know, you'll hear comments like, oh, it's just a phase, or you know, whatever the case may be, and you know, she's strong, she's resilient, you know, and she has a great partner, but it's sad when you see that with your family. And I think, you know, when you have people like DeSantis and the Republicans who really, you know, take advantage of bigotry and hatred to cynically further their political interests, you know, the consequence of that is at the end of the day, you know, more violence, you know, less safety for kids and adults and people to really live the way that, you know, every American has the right to, you know.
Ironically, just yesterday, my husband and I celebrated 10 years of being married.
Oh, congratulations.
And we've been together for 19.
Yeah.
So that really goes to show you that, you know, we're just like anybody else.
Exactly,
You know, I can't tell you that we've been a perfect, you know, relationship the whole time.
No relationship is.
Right? We've had our ups and downs. We've had our peaks and valleys, and we've had our wonderful times, and, you know, we've had tough times also, but we've stuck it out, and we're so much stronger now than we were when we started. And, you know, faith has gotten us through a lot. And so a lot of things that they say that we don't have,
Yeah.
I find myself having. I have faith. I'm a member of the Episcopalian Church on Miami Beach.
Yeah.
I strongly believe in the Holy Spirit. Going to Israel right now was just amazing in the spirituality. So LGBTQs, we have it all.
Yeah.
It's just that we love someone else that doesn't fall within your norms.
Yeah.
And then that's where and one of the things I loved about Israel in this trip that I just did was how they gave their point of view,
Mm-hmm.
but they never tried to impose their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So they was like, well, X, Y, and Z. Oh, I don't agree with it. I'm sorry you don't agree with it, but that's my point.
Yeah.
At no time did they try to brainwash us or anything like that. So it was really great.
Yeah.
It was great to see that a community could coexist even with differences.
Yeah.
And nowadays we can't even coexist within families within differences.
And it's sad too. I mean, I won't speak for the community, but in my experience, what I feel I've seen, again, especially, accelerating since 2022, but it felt like there was a period of time there where, we had moved away from kind of the overt bigotry and homophobia that, was more common when I was a little kid. And we're regressing now more recently, and that's sad. Actually, one of the things I mentioned on the campaign trail before is my first time ever canvassing was actually in 2000, I believe it was 6, when with Saved Aid, when they were out there. I believe it was the referendum, the Miami-Dade referendum,
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and because in all transparency, my mom dragged me along at the time. I was like, I just want to play video games at home, but she went out there and was like, hey, we got to go knock doors for this organization. This is really important. And so that was a great first what do you call it, first time just being exposed to civic activism and things like that. But you really see that there was a lot of work that we saw with organizations like Save and Equality Florida that had kind of almost for a period of time, it seemed like this just wasn't going to be a topic of conversation in our culture wars. And it's just really sad to see that regress, to, a worse place than I've seen. Again, correct me if you have a different experience, but, a worse place than I've seen in many years. So,
yeah, I mean, the pendulum right now is way over here right now.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully come back. So I'm a firm believer in that. So, there's so many topics that we have not yet discussed. When you win your nomination, I'll bring you back with hopefully the Republican challenger, and we'll be able to peel more layers off that. But now I leave you with a message to your constituents, to your district. What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for that. So, I mean, look, to speak to my constituents directly, I'm running to fight for the working families here, to really bring back those economic opportunities that we all deserve. I'm running to represent District 113 so that we can bring a Florida we can afford, where families can have a reasonable expectation and belief in building a life they're proud of, and being able to get by and support their own family. And in addition to that, though, making sure that we have leaders in Tallahassee that are going to really represent the interests of all the people that live here. Again, regardless of, who you love, what you identify as, where you're from. And we've really seen that slip away, in my opinion, over the last several years. So I'm somebody who's seen both sides of the financial spectrum. I've struggled a lot growing up, and I've really built a successful career for myself today. And I'm very proud of that. But that's getting harder and harder every day for working families here. And if we don't have leadership in Tallahassee that's going to fight for affordable housing, for good schools, for teachers who, are paid good enough, that are going to protect our LGBTQ community and our families and our friends, and to preserve and protect our environment, we're going to lose the city that I think has made, this a great place to live and where I've been proud to call home. And so I'm running to bring that, and bring that energy to Tallahassee, and ultimately, keep Miami the amazing place it's always been for me, and a place where people continue to say, I want to make this my home and raise my family here. So
great. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of Coming Out. I'm Gabriel Paez. Until next time, see you. Thank you.